We did do a couple public announcements last week. We did one through the governor's press conference where we talked about the MOU that was signed for the partnership with Google. So that information is that process or that project it's just another milestone and another step towards coming to fruition. I know a lot of people had asked like, why the CNMI? Why is Google doing this? The truth of the matter is, if you look at right now, one thing that's really important, and I'm going to share my screen and indulge me, if you will, a bit, just so that you guys can understand the mindset that was behind making this come to pass. So when our office was first created, one of the first focus priorities that the governor gave us was to establish trans-Pacific submarine cable landings within the CNMI. And the major reason for that is what we coined as internet independence. What it would do is allow us to not be fully reliant on another state or territory for our internet connectivity. And so with that being said, the direction we headed was down that path, was just to see what potential submarine cables would be passing our region in the near future, and what we would need to do from a governmental perspective to encourage them to maybe throw a branching unit towards us, like a spur, or even the far-fetched chance of actually landing within the CNMI. That being said, we started down that path, and we knew that there were a couple subsea systems, one being CPC that was planned, as well as Bifrost and Echo. We missed the window on those two latter ones. And then CPC, we were showing success in getting the Guam, American Samoa, Hawaii secure triangle to consider landing within the CNMI. And that's kind of where its infancy came about. We then enlisted support of the State Department. We raised the concern that with us not having trans-Pacific cables landing in the CNMI, there was a single point of failure for our telecommunication systems, and that was a national security issue. And so we were able to get advocacy from the State Department, advocacy from DOI, advocacy from the MTIA, advocacy from the FCC, basically advocacy from everyone on the federal government side that we needed to address this problem. With that being said, CPC ended up morphing into what we now know as the PCI subsea cable system. The PCI cable system is an effort by Google. We sort of lucked out. Their head guy, Brian Quigley, had a personal passion. He had lived in Fiji before, and he had a personal passion for connecting all of the Pacific Islands. He believed in his mind and in his heart that every Pacific Island needed direct connectivity to the backbone of the internet, and that would be extremely important in the future. And so he having that mindset, it really worked out well. We ended up discussing the PCI system and discussing the ability of us to get a spur. We knew that the nodes were going to be in Guam, Fiji, and French Polynesia, and that was going to be the new secure triangle of connectivity. And so what we were able to do is, give me 1 second, I'm going to share my screen. What we were able to do is we were also familiar with existing subsea cable systems that hyperscalers like Google were developing in our region. One of the first ones that they did was Google teamed up with Meta and did a cable called Echo. When Echo passed Guam, it dual landed, it split landed in Guam. So they had one cable past Guam, but have two cable landings. When we looked at the PCI structure and what they were intending to do, I hope you could all see my screen. Give me 1 sec. What we noticed was with the three nodes, Hawaii has been added recently. So Hawaii is now the fourth node. They call it a box cross. So a box cross subsea network system, which creates extreme redundancy. There's one cable that's missing from this screen that is being finalized, and it'll go from down here in Fiji over to Hawaii, and that'll create this cross through the middle of the box, and then they'll have the box that surrounds it. So this box cross subsea system adds the most extreme redundancy and reliability to the entire network. Should any cable go down, there's not just one redundant backup, but there'll be two redundant backups from each of the nodes. And so with that being said, when it was first put together as a triangle, it was Guam, Fiji, and French Polynesia as the secure triangle. And then branching units would go from these three cables to all of the Pacific Islands to ensure full connectivity. What we noticed right away was that at the nodes, if you notice in Fiji, they have two landings. That's for redundancy at the node level. So instead of just having one cable land in Fiji and susceptible to a cable break that would kill this entire cable connection, they do this split landing where they have one land on one shore and one land on another shore. So if there's any near shore breaks in this cable, the other cable is still attached, and so it provides an extra level of redundancy. And if you look at the other node, French Polynesia, you see the same thing. All the cables that pass by, whether it's like all the different cables, they'll do 2 landings at each point. So this lands 3 cables here, this lands the same 3 cables there. Again, that creates extreme redundancy. If any of these nearshore cables break, they still have connectivity for the whole system. Initially, they had planned for the split nodes to be in Guam because the infrastructure existed, and so they had planned for the PCI network to split land all of the cables to split land in Guam. What we were able to do, working with the advocates on the federal side, advocates on the local side, and with our government support, is convince Google to consider splitting the node in Guam, splitting it in the Marianas. And so to consider the entire Marianas Island as a node, the Northern Marianas Islands and Guam. And so for every cable on the PCI system that lands in Guam, to split it to land in the CNMI for ultimate redundancy, because now they're not bound by a catastrophic failure that may occur in Guam. Geopolitics and recent natural disasters made that a consider like it enabled them to truly consider splitting it between Guam and the CNMI. That being said, that's where we got to today. So instead of all the cables split landing on Guam to 2 split data centers or 2 split nodes on Guam for redundancy, one of them has been moved to the north and it's now situated in the CNMI. So every cable on the subsea system that's known as PCI, whether it's the PROA, whether it's the TPU cable going to Taiwan and the Philippines, whether it's Bulikula, which is actually connecting Fiji, French Polynesian, and Hawaii all together. They all notice here, they're all split and they land between both Guam and the CNMI. And so should anything catastrophic happen in Guam or should anything catastrophic happen in the CNMI, the chance of the full network going down is minimized. And so that's how we got to this point. So everybody asks, they're always like, why did this happen? Why are we here? What's in it for Google? What's in it for Google is extreme reliance and reliability. What's in it for the CNMI is we're no longer bound to a single point of failure that is Guam for our connectivity. And so that's where we're at. Some people ask, what about funding for this project? What does the CNMI put in? So going into this, we knew that by requesting for Google to shift from laying all their infrastructure in Guam to laying half of their infrastructure in the CNMI, that would come with additional costs because in the CNMI, we don't have the infrastructure in place that they have in Guam. And so with that being said, we asked them to crunch the numbers and tell us what the offset figures would be to move one of the split mirrored nodes from Guam to the CNMI. They were able to do that and come up with the figure. We negotiated with them at length over the past year. That was the delay on the MOU. The figure that they came out with was a figure that we thought we would be able to get from 100% federal funding. We ended up running into a few issues with one of our funding sources. I'll be frank, it was going to be the non-deployment funds of BEAD. I had anticipated we would have some of them available at the end of the network deployment. Because that was a guess on my part, those funds could not be confirmed. Because they could not be confirmed, I could not sign an MOU with speculative funds. That being said, we were able to further negotiate down the CNMI's investment. The total cost of the investment in the CNMI for all of these cables to land and for all of the infrastructure to be built up, including the hyperscaled IXP, came to around $93 million of total investment. The whole PCI subsea system went from $4 billion to $6 billion with the North and South PCI additions. So it's a $6 billion subsea system, and it's a $93 million investment in the CNMI. That being said, of the $93 million, the CNMI is contributing $13 million to that effort. That was the negotiated offset versus if they had just moved forward with developing in Guam. The $13 million, we were able to work with the U.S. Treasury to secure 100% federal funding from them and to have them approve this project as a whole. And so that's where we're sourcing our $13 million. It's funding from the U.S. Treasury that had to go, that was only earmarked towards broadband connectivity. And so that's the funding that we've sourced on our side as a CNMI government. And so that's the whole, in a nutshell, that's the whole history of how we got to where we're at. One thing to keep in mind, we did sign the MOU a couple weeks ago. That is a step in the right direction. It's a milestone kind of towards getting things to come to fruition. One thing we all have to know is that things can change, things can be altered. So what we've been doing as a broadband office out here is just ensuring that any obstacles that they encounter, we work with them as closely as possible to overcome those obstacles. Some of them that we've encountered in the past was a power situation. We overcame it by selecting Tinian as the location simply because they have overcapacity of power on the generator system, and they have land space available for a primary solar array as a primary power source if they choose to go in that direction. We also had to overcome because Tinian does have a military aspect to it. The surrounding waters do have what they call MPAs. They're protected areas for the military to drop anchor in times of war. Anchors and submarine cables don't go well together. And so because of that, Google did not want to move forward until we were able to ensure that a secure corridor that was free from anchor drops from the military was put in place. We were able to establish that. Other issues we came up with were just selecting the landing location, getting the permitting for the landing location, all these kind of stuff. All those hurdles have been met and overcome. It has been a focused effort of our government and our governor to bring this project to fruition. So as of today, we are right now on the submarine cable map that you see on your screen. If you would have checked this map a year ago or 6 months ago, we would not have any connectivity to Trans-Pacific cables at all. We weren't considered a player in the submarine cable field or world. Going forward, we are. So even at the most recent PTC, we were approached by 2 other submarine cable owners and operators for potential future landings. And so the hope is right now that we can position the CNMI to be a formidable spot for regen of Trans-Pacific cables as they cross our region. Guam already has quite a few, and we believe going forward, most submarine cable companies will adopt the Google mindset of the split resiliency and redundancy, and it would be in their best interest. And we're hopeful that with all future cables that pass our waters, they all consider doing something similar where the CNMI gets a split landing with Guam for the regen services that are needed before they pass through and head on to Indonesia or Singapore or Australia or wherever they might go. And so that's the Google project in a nutshell. And I never got a chance to really fully explain it to a lot of people because we didn't have an MOU signed and I was under an NDA. And so now I can freely talk about everything that led up to this point, and I can freely talk about things that are now in the public domain on the submarine cable map. So with that being said, if anybody has any questions or any concerns or would ever like to sit down and talk to us a little bit more about it, I'm completely open to it. From our government's perspective, what our main goal was when this office was established 2 years ago was to build up the proper, robust infrastructure so that the CNMI could truly look towards developing a digital economy. And in my mind and in our mind, that meant a strong climate-hardened terrestrial fiber to the home network, coupled with a robust Trans-Pacific cable landing system in place for accessing backhaul. But more importantly than accessing backhaul, our end goal with this whole Google project is not there yet. So the other half, once the infrastructure is in place and these cables land and the IXP is built, the next step will be doing what we talked about in our early days 2 years ago at TCIW. We talked with the FCC, NTIA, and we let them know that one of the biggest hindrances to the islands out here moving forward when it comes to AI or robotics or automation with cloud-based technologies is the latency. And so our end goal will be, once we develop all this infrastructure and we have it, will be to convince all of the application providers, content developers, providers, all of those systems to consider moving their edge to the Marianas. And that's already in the works for GCP, of course, because that's their IXP. But they also will be courting, and other people will be courting other large players like Cloudflare, Azure, who else is out there? Meta, all these different folks that are AWS to also move the edge of what's currently in the west coast of the United States for America's internet to here in the CNMI in the Marianas, because it's a mirrored split node. And so that's our hope, is that when we access these cloud-based technologies in the future, that cloud will be within a close enough distance to the CNMI that latency won't be an issue, at least as big as an issue as it is right now. And so that was also a driving force beyond everything we've been doing today. Is at the end of the day, our hope is to move the edge of the internet, or where the internet begins, to the Marianas as well. And so that's kind of where we're at. Any questions or any concerns or any comments or any criticisms, feel free. I'm open to it. We're open to it. We've been kind of going at breakneck speed here because everything has tight windows. But at least everything's still on track. And so we really believe that if everything stays in place within the next 3 years, the CNMI will have a fully developed, climate hardened fiber to the home terrestrial network and 4 trans-Pacific cables, if not more, and a robust IXP system out here, housing most of the applications and content that we require for day-to-day purposes on the internet. And so that's kind of where we're at. I hope that all kind of makes some sense to everyone here. This call is recorded. I will go ahead and ask our staff to put it online. I think this is information everybody should know. We are open to any comments or questions, so feel free, just let me know. Yeah.